Most people in today's world consider hierarchy to be some bureaucratic framework and infrastructure that exists, with offices and positions which are then filled by candidates who have passed some test or graduated from some institution or have succeeded in some type of popularity contest. While this is indeed a form of hierarchy, it's entirely artificial, contrived, unnatural, and the offices and positions will inevitably be filled by unworthy people. This sort of hierarchy can efficiently work for only 1 or 2 generations before cheating, nepotism, and all forms of skullduggery conquer its mechanisms. So let's first discuss the elite aspirant problem, arguably the most important problem right now in our society. Arguably, one of the most important. Every culture in its civilization stage faces this. When a culture is in the stage of rationalism, economic thinking, technical thinking, and democracy, also known as its civilization stage according to Oswald Spengler, an ideology of egalitarianism, sameness, and enforced mediocrity sets in. Excellence and difference are frowned upon, and natural hierarchy is questioned and no longer trusted. Kings are beheaded, and revolutionary democracies operating on capitalistic and communistic economic models are established. Hierarchy is then determined by money and ascended by a rat race. Winning the rat race for money is achieved by a candidate checking boxes on a spreadsheet. Employers and governments look to see who will be their most competent slaves, according to their machine-like, inhuman labor expectations. The employee or public servant is not seen as a unique, soulful human person, but as a machine to do a job, and that job is to increase the monetary gains of the company for the owners, or to piddle about in the bureaucratic corridors of the government, securing the illusory power held by politicians, ensuring that they are able to enrich themselves while pretending to serve society. The highest paying jobs that everyone wants, the so-called elite jobs, are corporate office jobs and government office jobs. Of course, in a democracy, people seek to do the least amount of work for the most amount of money. Hence why these types of jobs are the elite jobs. People become qualified for these jobs by attending and graduating from a brainwashing camp. Pardon me, a university. Upon being thoroughly indoctrinated and passing some tests, proof of indoctrination is given in the form of a diploma or a certificate. The highest form of indoctrination, of course, being the aptly named doctorate. Now, a person is entitled to an elite job, or so they're told. A fundamental characteristic of corporate and government industries, the so-called service industry, or what I prefer to call the financial, bureaucratic, administrative industry, is that it barely grows. A given society does not need that many number crunchers, government clerks, financiers, politicians, software engineers, information sifters, administrators, or managers. These industries cap out at a relatively small critical mass, and no more people are required for this industry to function properly. If a business, for example, grows, maybe it's a mineral extraction business, the number of managers can stay the same, but the number of mining operations grows. So you will need more miners, but you will not need more administrators. That's sort of what I'm getting at here. But these are the highest paying jobs with the most political authority and social status and the least amount of actual labor. Everyone is told to go to college and compete for these jobs because that is the key to money, and money is equated with happiness, power, and freedom according to our modern degenerate values. So more and more people every year are filling this competitive job market, which has basically the same number of jobs that it has always had and will always have. Sure, we sometimes artificially inflate the number of jobs available by inventing useless fake jobs like human resources and inter-office facilitation, or by increasing the number of managers and administrators in a given workspace, giving new meaning to the phrase useless idiot. But these are ineffective solutions that everyone hates and resents because of how obviously wasteful, insipid, and stupid they are. Nobody needs 8 managers in an office, you know? So Peter Turchin, a writer who writes on historical dynamics, a great author, by the way. In his book called End Times, he describes this elite aspirant problem, and he uses this analogy of musical chairs. Imagine playing a game of musical chairs, but instead of removing a chair every time the music stops, the number of chairs remains the same, and each round, a bunch of new players are added to the game. It won't be long before people begin cheating, standing in front of an empty chair and blocking everyone from approaching it while the music is playing so that they can claim it when the music stops, saving chairs for their friends and family, paying off the DJ to stop the song at a particular advantageous time, setting up booby traps to break the ankles of unsuspecting players, bribing the referee to look the other way while they pull out a knife and shank their competitors. You get the idea. Welcome to the modern world. This is what a modern hierarchy is. This is what the so-called job market is. And this is the end result of money thinking and democracy. People ascend this hierarchy through worthless bureaucratic credentials, wearing a false persona, nepotism, lying, flattery, backstabbing, distrust, and crime much of the time. Basically, you need to betray your own cultural heritage and ethics in one way or another to ascend this hierarchy. Everyone sells their soul at least a little bit to become a corporate or government employee. Nobody feels good about the jobs they have. You know what I mean? The solution, by the way, is not some economic program or a change in government policy, although those will inevitably come downstream from the real solution. The real solution is far deeper than that. This is, in fact, a spiritual problem, and therefore requires a spiritual solution, a spiritual transformation of the individual and thereby of the culture. Now, in a democracy, people despise excellence and difference. There is a great will to level everyone and everything to mediocrity and sameness. This is also the problem with Christianity, this belief that anyone who strives for spiritual excellence is corrupted by Luciferian arrogance or self-worship. This dual disease of Christianity and democracy in the Western world has eliminated the natural, organic hierarchy that all normal, healthy, traditional civilizations have. It has deceived everyone into humbling, aka humiliating, themselves, even though they may be able to achieve greatness. It has deceived everyone into hating and being jealous of all those people who are better than themselves, who excel in some field, who have more charisma, more self-awareness, more self-control, more dignity, more honor, more talent, a greater sense of duty, justice, and righteousness, and a more advanced spirituality. The people who are deeply lost and confused and infected and brainwashed by culture distortions sneer at these great individuals and gossip about them, calling them arrogant, self-righteous, demon-possessed, Luciferian, problematic, retrogressive, false prophets, and so on. But people with a healthy attitude, skeptical of liberal, rationalistic values from the Enlightenment era, skeptical of Christian weaknesses and dogma, people who have at least some self-awareness and self-control, are inspired by these excellent people, follow their example, serve them in their vision, and manifest it into this world, thereby improving and fulfilling the culture. And then they seek the attitude within themselves, the discipline necessary to cultivate so that they too may achieve such greatness. Simply put, excellent people inspire and uplift others. They bring order to the world around themselves. Action occurs around them without them really acting at all, due to their imperious, commanding presence. This is what the Eastern spiritual traditions mean when they say, acting without acting, the sage accomplishes all things. They are different from those around themselves, and it's obvious to everyone. People want to follow and be led by such individuals. A hierarchy will then naturally form underneath such people, without any pre-existing bureaucratic framework in place, without any official policy or political infrastructure that needs to be filled by candidates. It's a natural process. Hierarchy is a natural unfolding process. It is not a rigid bureaucratic framework. People who are near these excellent people in spiritual quality, but not quite equal, will happily be their subordinates. And people who are near these ones, but not quite equal, will be their subordinates, and so on. This is a living fact. I can attest to this fact from my own experience. You can look for it in the historical record, maybe in your own experience, in the world around you, in your own life. You'll see it if you look for it now that you are aware of it. Maybe you already were aware of it. You know, when you're around someone who is truly spiritually excellent, you will know it. When you meet someone who is worthy of your admiration and loyalty, there's no mistaking it. As long as, of course, you are mentally and spiritually healthy and hygienic yourself, not suffering from things like jealousy, envy, greed, hatred, susceptibility to propaganda or others' ideas, and so on. If you are poisoned by beliefs in liberalism, democracy, economic thinking, capitalism, communism, and other 19th century ideas and their concomitant spiritual diseases like jealousy, delusion, the lack of self-awareness, the lack of self-control, you can be easily misled by people who appear excellent on the surface, but are not truly excellent, such as flatterers, charlatans, rhetoricians, charismatic opportunists, and predators, as can easily be seen by the electoral processes of modern politics and the cult-like activity permeating the social, religious, and spiritual spheres. This is why liberals and believers in democracy, rationalists, capitalists, and communists are untrusting of leaders and great people, why they hate them and tell you to hate them as well, because they themselves are easily deceived into following terrible people and lack the capacity to discern a great spiritual leader from a simple arrogant ass, because they're corrupted by things like a greed for political power or hunger for money. They think people who have gained political power and money are the great people that they should follow. And of course, these examples are generally terrible people, and they themselves become terrible people, and they realize it, and then they think, oh, all leadership is evil. It's a terrible mental state to be in, and it's very indicative of a decaying society or a culture that is susceptible to culture distortions, these culture pathologies. They don't know what greatness looks like because individual greatness belongs to the realms of honor, chivalry, and spiritual difference. Three things which the modern world have turned their backs on and almost destroyed in the name of their degenerate values and vices, which they call progress, equality, and the pursuit of happiness. Only in an imperial society can honor, chivalry, and spiritual difference really flourish. In a democratic society, these things are labeled as dangerous thinking, misogynistic, outdated, laughable, superstitious, retrogressive, supremacist, and so on. But these virtues are easily recognizable by people who have even a small amount of spiritual discipline or spiritual disposition within themselves. But we all know, either consciously or instinctively, whether you're a liberal or a monarchist, that a society must have a hierarchy to function, to even exist. Without hierarchy, you have anarchy, and no culture or civilization is possible under anarchic conditions. Democracy and Christianity are indeed urges toward anarchy. They are inherently anti-civilization. Christianity, with its world denial and its hatred of powerful cultures, believing that all worldly power is ultimately satanic, and liberalism, with its desire to atomize everyone and level everything to mediocrity, make civilization impossible, ultimately. So what did we do to protect these dogmatic beliefs in liberalism and Christianity and reconcile those leveling urges toward equality and mediocrity while maintaining a functioning society? Well, we invented the bureaucratic hierarchy, which we are all currently lamenting and suffering under. Everyone has an equal opportunity to climb the bureaucratic hierarchy by gaining certification from some institution. Any and all need for charisma, honor, chivalry, spiritual excellence, duty, responsibility, and difference, and the proof of accomplishment are legally stripped away, and any fool with a degree is qualified to make political, economic, artistic, and cultural decisions for society. This bureaucratic hierarchy is seen as a happy medium between natural authority and complete anarchy. Natural authority, the enemy of Christians and liberals, is stifled to the point of elimination and has no place to flourish or express itself, except for perhaps in the ranks of the military on foreign battlefields. And then people can feel a bit anarchic and equal, fulfilling their Christian and liberal desires, with the notion that anyone at all can climb the bureaucratic hierarchy, and they can pretend that the system is fair. However, Difference is still clearly desired, as can be seen by the generally abhorrent, just below the surface arrogance of college graduates who think they're wiser, more moral, and more deserving of power than everyone else simply because they got brainwashed by mainstream ideology and have the paperwork to prove it. This desire for difference flies in the face of their liberal values and belief in equality, rendering them all essentially hypocrites. Saying one thing when it's socially and politically convenient, but doing another thing because they desire to have power over others and have arrogated that power to themselves through bureaucratic maneuvering, academic test-taking, and wealth acquisition. They are, in fact, utterly unable to inspire confidence and loyalty in people due to their complete lack of self-awareness, their lack of spirituality, their lack of self-control, their lack of charisma, their lack of good vibes, essentially. Yet they believe that they deserve respect and obedience because they have a piece of paper that says they're entitled to it, or simply because they have more money or make more money than someone else. They believe certifications and money are divine investitures signifying their worth and authority. This is the worldview of Calvinism, the logical conclusion of Christianity. And they are also the ideas of Karl Marx and Adam Smith, the main ideologues of communism and capitalism, respectively. Liberals par excellence. Such a hierarchy is fundamentally flawed and cannot be corrected because the framework for the hierarchy itself is born of the cultural diseases and pathologies that infect our society. You can see my video called Cultures Are Organisms for more information on culture pathologies and how they affect us. The solution, in my opinion, is to create a new elite organically. We must render the current elite powerless and irrelevant by becoming spiritually excellent ourselves and replacing them through sheer force of will and charisma, simply by our very presence and existence. This will and charisma comes from adherence to the great spiritual tradition through self-awareness training, real vigorous self-awareness training, which leads to self-control, which leads to spiritual initiation, a radical and immense transformation of consciousness that renders you as different from other people as a human is different from animals. A gulf of difference is created between a spiritually elite person and everyone else. Just look at the sages, the magicians, the prophets, the adepts, the great men throughout history from all cultures. The possibility of being one of these great men is your birthright if you have the fortitude, endurance, will, perseverance, self-possession, vitality, and singularness of focus to walk such a lonely, arduous, and estranging path. But it is the highest path. It is the most difficult thing a person can do, and you must sacrifice all that you have and wish to have in order to succeed. This path of self-awareness requires self-honesty, and that is why it is the most difficult path. This new elite will be recognized as superior to the old elite simply by comparison. I can attest to this in my own life, as I mentioned earlier. Why is it, forgive my self-aggrandizing indulgence here, but why is it that at the age of 18, I could stand on stage at a forum in front of 2,000 people in a university auditorium next to doctors of economics, political science, and philosophy, giving talks on the problems of the day? And I would say things in utter contradistinction from these so-called experts. And the crowd, during the Q&A session, would consult only with me, ignoring the others with whom I shared the stage. Their ideas and personalities were considered utterly uninteresting compared with mine, even though they had decades of academic experience behind them. Why is it that at the Occupy Wall Street movement in Manhattan in 2011, I could stand on a bench with a megaphone and in a few short sentences could earn the ire, jealousy, and hatred of the communists, liberals, capitalists, and bankers who were there, while gaining the unquestioning loyalty of the crowd and the sympathy of the police force, while providing them with an adequate and satisfying criticism of international banking that inspired them to search for their own solutions afterward? Why is it that with every collaborative artistic endeavor that I enter into, even with total strangers, immediately everyone on the team refers to me to determine the foundation and direction of the creative possibilities, and asks me to lead the delegation of work and to judge the final result. Even though I don't insist on leading anything or anyone, they automatically expect me to do this. Why is it that wherever I go, I am immediately treated like a trusted psychotherapist and confidant, a spiritual counselor, a priest, and a wise teacher by friends, family, and strangers alike, without anyone doubting or questioning this phenomenon? Why is it that whenever I enter a room full of people, suddenly the mood changes to whatever my current mood is, and I dictate the emotional ebbs and flows for the entire time I'm present, without doing anything at all? I can literally influence the emotional states of people around me without lifting a finger or saying a word. And I'm sure many of you have a similar experience, especially if you have some sort of deep spiritual tradition that you practice. Now, again, forgive me for this blowing my own trumpet here, but this is a real life example of what I'm talking about, and I really only like to speak from my own experience. So I know what I'm saying is true. Obviously, you don't have to believe me just from a testimony on a video like this, but look for it in your own life, look for it in the people around you. Test what I'm saying, and you will see it. So I know that I'm not simply regurgitating the words of the Stoics, the Taoists, the Hindus, modern occultists who say what I'm saying, but I am a living example of this invisible authority that is automatically recognized by others. I have no college degree, I have no money, I have no social, political, or economic status to speak of. This command of the external world is the result of true, deep spiritual discipline and dedication to the spiritual path, unwavering, single-pointed dedication to the expense of everything else in life. Like I said, I don't pursue money or really, I don't pursue a social life. I have friends, but I'm not as distracted, let's say, by the things that the society offers, because I care more about self-awareness training and self-control training. I don't need to flaunt my money or frame a diploma and hang it on the wall or show my business card or relay my past exploits on a resume. I simply enter a place and people can feel the air change. They feel the energy shift, and I'm automatically recognized and respected, at least by sane, healthy people. Obviously, I'm hated by the enemies of spirituality, enemies of regality, the enemies of difference. They also recognize me immediately without knowing anything about me, because this is a subtle force that emanates from a person that others are influenced by and can feel. So most people, in fact, love to be around such individuals. We refresh and enliven you, we fill you with spiritual energy, with interesting new ideas, we discharge your nervous systems and lighten your mood and alleviate stress. We bring out the best in you and encourage you to be who you truly are. We listen to your troubles and help put you at ease and open a new chapter in your life. We also have an unwavering sense of justice, fairness, and righteousness, and we make terrifying enemies with indomitable wills. So we also fill people with a sense of comfort and protection and inspiration by standing up for what is right against the forces of degeneration, darkness, and chaos in any situation, and we're not afraid to take that stance immediately and swiftly and be stern about it, no matter how socially unacceptable it is to make a radical, stern stance at a moment. Oftentimes, I will call people out at a bar, at a dinner table, at a hangout, at a music venue, who I see is doing something unfair and unjust. And it can be very socially awkward, but there will be a large number of people in that room that will then thank me later for doing it. You know what I mean? So it seems like socially taboo, and a lot of people freak out and tell me to chill out, but then later, privately, they're like, actually, thank you so much for doing that. And it's that fearlessness that then inspires them to also become fearless leaders. So you can create leaders by being a leader. In the courtroom, our word becomes more influential and just than the word of the judges. In the classroom, our wisdom becomes more helpful than the science and citations of the professor. I used to hijack college classes before I dropped out. They hated me for that. In the Senate chambers, our common sense becomes more authoritative and sensible than the written law. In the social sphere, our generosity, loyalty, and high standards become the foundations for tribes, communities, and local governments. In the military, our dignity, courage, and forthrightness become the morale and the might of the warriors in our ranks. In the economic sphere, our fairness and sense of stewardship becomes the seed of prosperity and shines a light on the greed of the parasites. All this is simply because we are fundamentally, internally different from most people, because we made the effort to be different. We did not fall for the urge toward mediocrity. We do not cave into their pressures, their enticements, their bribes, their desires, their dogmas, their beliefs, their mediocre mentality, or their mental illnesses and corruption. We search within ourselves for our own subjective reality and live by it. We do what we will to do as individuals, resistant to all propaganda and social pressures, because we live by what is within us, not by what is outside of us coming in. So therefore we are resistant to others' ideas and resistant to propaganda, and we live by our own internal idea. And this inspires the hell out of everyone around us to be like that too. Obviously, this is to the shock and horror of those whose authority rests merely on credentials, money, and bureaucracy. Our authority rests in spirit and shines forth in charisma. Charisma is an unquantifiable, irrational power that the bureaucrats, rationalists, and money thinkers cannot comprehend. They can't buy it, they can't sell it, and therefore they cannot compete against it. They cannot mathematize it, they cannot produce it. They do not have it, and therefore they despise it because they cannot use it. But we can, and it is the greatest form of power. There's military power, economic power, bureaucratic power, and charismatic power. And charismatic power is the manifestation of spiritual power, the highest form of power. The other three are nothing in comparison to charisma. Real charisma, that means the chrism, that means the anointment, that means the aligning yourself with the Spirit and living by it. They cannot compete with this. We are essentially irresistible because of this. Everything around us finds order and falls neatly into its natural place, and people feel free, more productive and more lively and more creative when we're around, because we create this order, and this order creates this freedom for these people to truly be themselves. And when they can truly feel like they can take the mask off and be themselves, everybody is far happier, more creative, and more productive. And it's simply because we're there telling everyone it's okay to be yourself. I am myself, and you see that I am myself, therefore you be yourself, and it's okay. And everything works so smoothly from that point forward. This is what makes people like me a leader, people like you, hopefully, or you can be like this too. There's nothing special about me. I simply put the work in. That's it. This is also why the current corrupt, unnatural elite cannot stand us. It's why we're so reviled and ridiculed and persecuted in the mainstream and in the snobbier social circles. I'm not trying to be like, oh, I have a persecution complex or anything. I don't care. But it's an anthropological fact. Charismatic leaders are demonized, especially in our history books. So these bureaucratic and economic elite must be replaced. We all know this. Everyone knows this from the left to the right, that these bureaucratic and economic elite must be replaced by spiritually excellent people, in my opinion. They just can't be replaced by anybody, not just by the communists who want to just take power, the mastery of money for themselves, or by the libertarians who want to do the same thing, or by materialistic right-wingers who don't really understand dictatorship or authority. They just want to claim it for themselves. What needs to happen is a real spiritual inner transformation, and spiritually excellent people must replace the elite. If we are to know real freedom, real prosperity, and actual cultural restoration and cultural creativity. It won't be easy, nor will it happen quickly, but real meaningful revolutions are seeds that are planted and nourished. So if we want to develop a real culture with real roots that vitalize future generations, this is how it will be accomplished. simply by being internally different and spiritually excellent. And we become the forefathers of lineages and of schools of thought and of memory, essentially, of just based on how we lived our lives. Memories of us become inspiring, and we create the future of our culture in this way. This is just my opinion of how to develop the roots, because especially here in the United States, we are essentially a quite rootless people. A lot of us came from Europe, from Asia, and from Africa, and from wherever, and we are all essentially a rootless people. But the thing is an acorn was planted at one point to become roots. We can become those roots. We can be the acorn that plants the roots. It has to start somewhere. You can be that person. So don't feel rootless. If you feel rootless, you must become the root yourself. You are the new root. Make that part of the guidance for your life. Let that idea inspire you. To begin this true spiritual awakening, one has to practice self-awareness training and self-control training, self-honesty, to bring about a real initiation. That initiation is a fundamental transformation of consciousness. So we can begin with some books, right? Although ultimately you will depend only on yourself, not on books or on other people's ideas, when you realize that you are utterly sufficient for yourself. You lack nothing. But sometimes people's ideas can help. So, for example, we got some good books here. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, one of my favorites. We've got the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, again, great book. The Bhagavad Gita, this is good. If you get this copy by Srimad Swami Prabhupada, I would ignore any commentaries. Like a lot of sages like to go in and write their own commentaries on Hindu scriptures. They're always polluted by whatever thinking was prevailing at the time that they wrote the commentaries. I would say just read the text. We've got the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali. Helps with just self-awareness, knowledge, and self-control, literally like physical bodily self-control, but that leads to subtler self-control. The Shiva Samhita, excellent practical instructions for self-awareness training and energy and bodily regulation. We've got In Search of the Miraculous. This is a good one. This is by P.D. Uspensky, but it's about the guy named G.I. Gurdjieff. He was a great spiritual teacher. Really practical instructions on how to go through the self-observation training that requires self-honesty, how to actually do it. It's really good, specific, step-by-step instructions for self-observation training. How to Know Higher Worlds by Rudolf Steiner, for those of you who are a little bit more mystically oriented and wish to develop clairvoyant capabilities to see into the spiritual world, to really mystically embody some spiritual currents, the spiritual currents that are around you right now, to recognize them. We've got 3 volumes here of Introduction to Magic. This is by Julius Evola and the Ur Group, which were a bunch of his friends from the 1920s. This, again, step-by-step instructions of how to do physical and mental exercises that help with self-control and self-awareness and the increasing of spiritual power. Another by Julius Evola is Pagan Imperialism. This helps to understand what a real natural hierarchy is. And Initiation into Hermetics by Franz Bardon. This is a very good one. Again, extremely practical. I really only like practical manuals that say you can do this exercise, you will get this result. I hate the sort of things that just tell you the theory of stuff. Everything I'm telling you here, everything I'm offering is super pragmatic and practical stuff that is step A, step B, step C, result A, result B, result C, and this is how you do it. And then we've got 2 volumes here of the Srimad Valmiki Ramayana, the Ramayana. Good luck with this. It took me a long time to get through. But again, the Ramayana is the epic of Rama, a great hero of the ancient world. So these books will awaken within you the ability to know yourself, to look at yourself with total and complete honesty, self-honesty, and to overcome the darkness and chaos of your lower nature, but without pacifying you, without eliminating the power that can be derived from within you. That's something that's a problem with a lot of New Age and Christian beliefs, is that they are very disempowering. They are like, not to agree with Karl Marx here, but they are opiates. They kind of put you in this lull of hoping and thinking without really accomplishing anything. These books here that I recommend are very practical. I've been studying them since I was a teenager, and I've been practicing spiritual disciplines for as long as I can remember, and these are the ones that I think are the best published in the English-speaking world, the most practical and the most useful, and that have real tangible results. And again, it's a real commitment to do this, to unfold these aspects of you, to look at yourself, to look at the dark parts of yourself and shine a light on them, and to really control yourself, and through that stillness, creating stillness and serenity within yourself allows you to see clearly, unclouded by emotions, anger, jealousy, or even things like happiness and elation no longer affect you or pull you from your center, and you can begin to see things very, very clearly, and you can act in total calmness in any situation. In any situation on a battlefield, you can be in total and complete calmness and still fight a war. You know, you can constantly pull from that center a richness, like an infinite outflowing of spirit that really informs your actions, and your whole life becomes like being in the zone. You know, the idea of flow and being in the zone. From that center, you can always be in the zone all the time, and these books really help you get there. So I'll leave you with this. Who is better, the one who conquers a city or the one who conquers himself? One is king for a day, the other is king for eternity.